Hello, Sarah of SEK Handmade here, and today I'm going to share with you how to make these adorable knit polymer clay earrings. Ever since I discovered how to make these, I have had so much fun making them in lots of colors, and I've even given them as gift. They make great gifts even to non-yarny friends. So let me show you what we're going to need to make these adorable earrings. First, you're going to need clay. I recommend a polymer clay because it needs no extra finishing and it's extremely durable. You're also going to want some sort of sharp implement. I found an awl to work really well for doing all of the cutting and any hole poking that I needed, though I'll link to my blog post below in the description, which has all sorts of ideas about other tools you could use instead of an awl, if you don't have one just laying around like I did. You are also going to need clay cutters, which you wouldn't have to have if you're super crafty and think you can cut your earrings freehand. Go for it. That's amazing. I found these clay cutters though, which you'll notice look a lot like teeny tiny cookie cutters, to be super handy for making very small shapes and also making them really uniform. Then you're also going to need to decide what kind of earring you want. I made some post earrings and some dangly earrings. If you're gonna make post earrings, you're gonna want to get an earring post, and you can see my earring post has a nice base to glue my finished clay product to, and then it's got the post and an earring back. If you're going to choose a post earring, you're also going to want some super strong glue. This is just what I have laying around my house, but you can see it says that it's white glue. I would recommend, if you're not just going to use something laying around your house, that you make sure you get a glue that dries clear, because you could, on some of my pairs of earrings, see a tiny bit of white through the fabric of my knit polymer clay earring. So I would go with clear if you're going to buy something. If not, it really wasn't that noticeable, and I'm sure it'll be fine. If you want dangly earrings, you need to get earring hooks. This is just the part of the earring that goes through your ear, and you may want to put a back on these too so that you're not in danger of it falling out. If you're going to use earring hooks, you may need to use split jump rings. Split jump rings are simply just a ring of metal that has a split in them that can be pulled apart so that you can attach the clay piece to the earring hook. You can see that little piece of the earring hook does not give you a lot of room to go through the piece of clay. So you're probably going to need a jump ring unless your hook has a much larger loop at the bottom of it. And if you're going to use earring hooks and jump rings, you're probably going to want a pair of needle nose pliers. These will just help you twist the findings apart so that you can put your clay piece on them. So those are the supplies that you need. The first step you're going to do with your clay is to condition your clay. Now, this sounds super fancy, but it is really nothing more than just warming up the clay in your hands by manipulating it a little bit. You can squish it and squeeze it and roll it around in your hands into a little ball. I found that once I had conditioned my clay, it was easier to break it into a few smaller pieces to work with it. So I'm just going to break it in half, and then I'm going to break each half in half again. This does not have to be, it doesn't have to be perfect. They don't have to all be exactly the same size. Once you have broken your clay into some smaller pieces, you're just going to roll it out. It's like playing with Play-Doh again. Back and forth, you're going to roll each of these pieces into a fairly thin tube, and I have found that just kind of going back and forth a little bit and working with them in smaller pieces makes this go pretty quickly. I'm putting pretty light pressure on my clay here, and I'm trying to get the whole thing as uniform and as smooth as possible. And you're just going to keep working back and forth and back and forth, whoops, until you've got a nice long and thin piece. Now, if you think back to those earrings I showed you the first time, those were pretty little, and you've got to fit several of these pieces in that earring, or it's not going to look like it's knit. So you're going to want to be nice and thin. Now you can see mine's gotten a little wobbly here. When it gets too long, it gets hard to work with. What I have found is I just take my awl and I cut it in half, and maybe even in half again. And then those tinier pieces are a lot easier to work with. And then just take one of them and keep on rolling. And now you can see this one is getting about to the teeny tiny little size I want all of them to be. If you're just making a pair of earrings, you don't need these pieces to be super long. 3 to 4 inches is plenty, so this piece is perfect. I'm going to go ahead and roll the rest of this into this, and then I'll show you the next step. All right, I have rolled quite a few little tubes of clay here, and you do want to make sure that you have an even number of them to make the earrings for this next step. And you can see mine are not perfect. They're not perfectly uniform width, they're not perfectly uniform length, and that's okay. So you don't need to worry about that too much. The next step is where the magic happens. You're going to pick 2 of your pieces of clay here, and I'm just going to grab some that are similar in length, and you're just going to lay them right next to each other in your hand. Then for your first grouping, you're going to twist away from you, and you can see when I twist away, it winds the clay together. Now up here at the top, I've wound it a little too tight. I like this a bit more, and so I'm going to try to keep that amount of winding throughout the rest of it. Keeping it as uniform as possible helps give your earrings a really nice look. So that's my first piece. Now I'm going to take another 2 pieces of clay, put them right up next to each other, and you'll remember before I wound it away from me, this time I'm going to wind it towards me. Okay, I'm just going to take that top and wind it towards me. And again, I'm just going to keep winding until I've got about it uniform with the piece I made before. I'm going to wind that just a little tighter. And then I'm going to line my pieces up together so that you can see when they're uniform, they make those V-like, just like a knit stitch. And I'm going to push these together just a little bit because the fewer and smaller the holes you have, there are going to be some little spaces. You don't want it to get completely smushed together, but the fewer and smaller the holes, the more solid your earring will be once you cut it. So I'm going to make more of these pieces, alternating winding away from me and towards me, and then I'm going to line them all up to make even more of my knit fabric. Okay, so now that I've wound my pieces together, I'm just going to take my clay cutter and I'm going to look to see how they look on my clay piece and decide if this is perfect for my earring or if I need to make some adjusting, like making it wider or something. So you can see I've chosen this larger rectangle clay cutter, and when I hold that over my piece of clay, you can see that 2 of them fit on there, and I want 2 earrings, so that's important. And also that you can see a pretty decent amount of my clay fabric through the cutter. And so I think I'm happy with that piece for my rectangular earrings. Now, one of my smallest clay cutters is this little circle, and I really like it because it makes a super cute little stud. But when I put that over my clay here, you can see that you don't get much of the fabric through that little tiny circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of my clay and I'm going to make some even smaller rows of clay and use them to cut some circle earrings out of too. All right, now that I have my 2 different sizes of knit fabrics, you can see this one with the smaller pieces turned out to be a much finer weave, I guess, than this one that's thicker, which works for the larger clay cutter, and this one works better for the smaller clay cutter. So you're going to want to just adjust the size of the pieces of clay you make to fit the size of the clay cutter you have or the vision of your design. So all you have to do to use these clay cutters is line them up where you want them on the on your clay piece and gently push them down. Then I find, and I have no idea if this is if this really works or not, but I find that if I wiggle them just a little bit, it makes them come right out of the piece of clay really easily. And then you can just gently push the piece of clay out of the clay cutter. And there's my first earring. You could see that my awl turned out to be a really handy tool to go ahead and gently remove my smaller earring pieces from this teeny tiny cutter once I figured out my finger didn't fit in there. You just want to be really gentle. This clay is soft, and the more you manipulate it, the more likely you are to kind of mark it up or end up making them not be the right shape anymore, misshaping them. Don't know if that's a word, but you know what I mean. The next step you want to do is I like to look at all of my edges. You can see this earring looks pretty good. It doesn't have any gaps in that bottom. That helps make sure that this is going to stay together once it's baked. So just go ahead and check all of your edges to make sure that there aren't any gaps. If you've pushed it together pretty well, there shouldn't be too many gaps. You can see right there, there's a little gap. So I'm just going to take my finger and I'm going to try to push the clay together there to make sure that once my earring is baked, that doesn't fall apart. The last step you want to do before you bake is if you're going to make your earring a dangly earring, you're going to want to put your hole into the clay before it's baked. And so I have my awl for that. I'm just going to choose where I want my hole to be. I'm going to try to center it as much as possible, and then you want to kind of find a happy medium between getting so close to the edge that your clay might break and getting so far down that there's no way that your jump ring is going to span the distance from the edge of the clay to where you put your hole. So I'm just going to carefully pick my spot, and I'm going to stick my awl through, and then I'm going to make sure that I've got a nice hole on the back side too. So I'm just gently going to push it through, pull it out back the other side, and then open up this hole a little bit from the other side too, just to make sure that I have a nice even hole all the way through my earring. I'll do that on the other ones as well, checking the edges and putting the hole into my final dangly earring, and then you're just going to put them on your pan and cook them according to the instructions of your clay. I found that the minimum cooking time is usually plenty for the earrings. They're a pretty small piece, and so they don't take a lot of extra baking. Once you take your clay pieces out of your oven, you want to be sure that they are fully cooled before you handle them. Not only are they hot, but also I have found that they don't fully harden until they have cooled. Now, I did a little research when I made my first pair of earrings because I thought, gosh, I should probably like put some sort of sealant or something on these. But I did find that polymer, which I should have already known, means plastic. And so once these are baked, they are essentially plastic and they don't really need to be sealed. If you are making stud earrings, it's super simple. All you do is take your glue, and I would recommend, since this is the smaller piece, putting the glue onto the earring back. It just takes a teeny little bit. See that tiny dot I used? And then I'm going to place my earring over the back, and then I'm just going to flip it over and make sure that I've got it centered on the back. And if you want, you could not center it. Whatever you do, just do it with intention to make sure that the front of your earring is going to look right once it's set on your ear. And then I set them upside down until they're fully dry. This way you're not going to have that back shifting around at all and ending up stuck on there in a place you don't want it to be. Once the clay again is cool, it's totally fine to sit upside down like this. If you're making your dangly earrings, you're going to want to take your jump ring and your needle nose pliers, and you're going to twist that jump ring apart. I don't recommend pulling it apart. It changes the shape of it too much and then makes it hard for it to go back to the shape it's supposed to be in. Then you're just going to take it and put it through the hole that you made on your earring, and then slip the earring hook on there too. And then take and twist it back closed all the way. And then I like to twist that around to the back, and then you have your earring. And that is how you make a knit polymer clay earring. A link to a blog post with very detailed instructions and links to all of my supplies is in the description below. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any tips and tutorials, and happy crafting!